Hi, this story is my mother-in-law said I was overreacting because my husband only cheated while I was pregnant. My name is Shay Donovan. I am 28 years old, a freelance graphic designer, originally from Galway, Ireland, now living in Portland, Oregon. At 30 weeks pregnant, my world is usually measured in kicks against my ribs and the steady rhythm of a paint roller against drywall. Yellow, primrose yellow, a shade that is neither a promise of a son nor a declaration of a daughter, but a quiet middle ground I carved out for myself. The afternoon sun in Portland is thin, a pale wash of light that cuts across the nursery floor at a sharp angle. It catches the dust motes dancing in the air, highlighting the bare white surface of the fourth wall. The other three are already done glowing like a soft lamp in the dimming afternoon. My back aches with a dull, heavy throb. Every movement requires a conscious effort, a shift of weight to accommodate the life growing inside me. I dip the roller into the tray, listening to the wet, sticky sound of the paint clinging to the nap. My fingers are stained at the tips a sunny yellow that contrasts with the silver clad-aw ring on my right hand. The heart of the ring faces inward toward my knuckle, a sign that I am taken. The playlist on the iPad is supposed to be soothing. Lullabies for Bean, I called it. The music is thin and tinny, competing with the rhythmic shh of the roller. The scent of the low VOC paint is faint, a clean chemical tang that mixes with the dregs of my cold Earl Grey tea sitting on the windowsill. Bean kicks, a sharp, insistent jab that makes me pause, my hand resting on the swell of my denim overalls. Mitchell wanted to know the gender. Judith, my mother-in-law, didn't just want to know. She insisted on a party, a reveal, a spectacle. I said no. It was the only time I'd ever stood my ground against her, and the victory felt as small and fragile as the baby's toes. Ding! The sound is sharp. It cuts through the lullaby like a knife through paper. I don't look at first. I keep the roller moving, a long vertical stroke that leaves a trail of primrose yellow on the white plaster. Ding! 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 4 notifications in a row. Too many for a Saturday afternoon. I set the roller down across the tray, my movements slow and deliberate. I wipe my hands on a rag, though the yellow stains remain stubborn. The iPad sits on the white rocking chair I spent 3 days sanding and repainting. The screen is lit up. A stack of iMessages synchronized from Mitchell's phone while he's out for his Saturday run. I don't mean to read them. I shouldn't. But the name at the top of the stack isn't one I recognize. Last night was fun. When can I see you again? My heart doesn't race. It does something else. It seems to stop entirely, leaving a cold, hollow space in my chest. I reach out. My finger hovers over the glass, trembling just enough to be visible. I tap the notification. The conversation unfolds in reverse. It's like watching a building collapse in slow motion, floor by floor. Wednesday, she has her ultrasound appointment. I'll be free after 4, Mitchell wrote. The reply from the unknown number is immediate. Perfect. Your place or the usual? The usual. She's suspicious if I'm home late. I stand there, the yellow paint dripping slowly from the roller in the tray. Drip, drip. It sounds like a clock ticking away the life I thought I had. I scroll up. It goes back weeks, months. It's a map of a betrayal I was too tired, too pregnant, too focused on nursery colors to see. Then another thread catches my eye. A different number. A name that makes my breath hitch in my throat. Judith. I tap it. The messages are older, more clinical. Thank you for keeping him occupied, Judith wrote to the same unknown number. He gets restless when she's around too much. When's the next payment? The woman replied. You said the 1st. I'll Venmo you tomorrow, dear. Same as usual. And you promise you won't find out? She won't, Judith replied. She doesn't look at his phone. She trusts him. That's what makes this work. She trusts him. That's what makes this work. The words are a physical weight. They press down on my shoulders, forcing the air out of my lungs. Trust. I had built a house out of it. I had let Judith choose the crib. I had let her bring me soup when I was too nauseous to stand. I had believed her when she hugged me and whispered that I was finally part of a real family. My grandchild, she always said. Never your baby, always mine. I look at the yellow paint on the newspaper-covered floor. It has pooled into a shape that looks like a tear, but my eyes are dry. My jaw is tight, the muscles aching as I grind my teeth together. I don't cry. I don't scream. I pick up the iPad and my movements are precise, almost mechanical. Screenshot. 1, 2, 10, 20. I scroll through the Venmo records. I capture the dates, the amounts, the cold hard proof of a transaction. My husband was a purchase. My marriage was a managed inconvenience. I open my laptop on the pallet bookshelf. My hands are steady as I airdrop the files into a hidden folder. I name it Nursery. It feels appropriate. I go back to the iPad. I clear the notification history. I close the messages. I tap the play button on the lullaby playlist. The music starts again, soft and mocking. I pick up the paint roller. My arm feels heavy like it's made of lead, but I finish the stroke. I cover the last of the white. The fourth wall is now primrose yellow, just like the others. Bean kicks again, a violent movement that makes me gasp. I drop the roller into the tray and walk to the small dresser in the corner. I open the top drawer. Beneath a stack of tiny organic cotton onesies lies a dark green folder. Inside is my Irish passport. I touch the embossed harp on the cover. My grandmother's claddagh ring catches the light, the silver heart still facing me. I think of Galway. I think of the rain and the way the Atlantic smells after a storm. I know. I whisper, my hand resting on my belly. The words are for the baby and for the woman I used to be 10 minutes ago. I know now, and I am going to take care of us. The phone downstairs rings. It's the landline. I know the rhythm of the rings, two short, one long. It's Judith. I don't answer. I stand in my yellow room and wait for the silence to return. The nursery was quiet, the air thick with the smell of drying primrose yellow paint and something else, something colder that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. I stood in the center of the room, my hand still resting on the swell of my stomach. Bean moved, a slow rolling pressure that usually brought a smile to my face, but now it felt like a warning. My fingers were still stained yellow at the tips, looking like nicotine burns in the dimming light. I stared at the iPad sitting on the white rocking chair. The screen had gone dark, but the ghost of those messages burned behind my eyelids. The sound of the front door opening downstairs echoed up the hallway. It was a heavy, familiar thud, followed by the jingle of keys being tossed into the ceramic bowl on the entryway table. Mitchell was home from his run. I moved. It was a clumsy, frantic scramble. I grabbed the iPad, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I needed to hide it, to put it back exactly where I had found it, before the rhythmic thud of Mitchell's sneakers hit the stairs. My hand shook as I tucked the device under the pile of linen blankets on the changing table. I barely had time to pick up a clean rag and start scrubbing at a phantom spot of paint on the windowsill before his shadow fell across the doorway. Mitchell stood there, breathless, his gray-tech shirt darkened with sweat. He looked exactly like the man I had married 3 years ago in a small ceremony in Cannon Beach. His hair was damp, sticking to his forehead, and he was smiling that easy, boyish smile that always made me feel like the center of his universe. "Hey, baby," he said, leaning against the doorframe. He didn't come inside, mindful of the wet paint. "Wow, you finished the last wall. It looks incredible, Shay." I kept my back to him for a second too long, focusing on the grain of the wood under my rag. My voice felt like it was stuck in the back of my throat, dry and brittle. "Thanks," I said. I turned, forced my muscles to relax, and tried to find the woman I had been an hour ago. I wanted to get it done before the light faded. He stepped closer, his eyes scanning the room. For a heartbeat, his gaze lingered on the changing table where the iPad was hidden. My breath caught. I waited for him to ask why it was there, why I wasn't using it for my music. Instead, he just wiped sweat from his brow and looked back at me. "Mom's downstairs," he said, his tone shifting to that slightly weary, placating note he always used when talking about Judith. "She brought over a roast. Said she figured you wouldn't want to cook after painting all day. You know how she is." I knew exactly how she was. The image of the Venmo receipts flashed in my mind. "I'll Venmo you tomorrow, dear. Same as usual." "That was thoughtful of her," I managed to say. The words felt like stones in my mouth. "She's in the kitchen, already setting the table. She wants us down in 10 minutes. You okay? You look a little pale." Mitchell reached out, his hand moving toward my cheek. I instinctively flinched, a small, sharp movement that I couldn't suppress. He froze his fingers, inches from my skin. The silence in the nursery stretched, becoming a living thing between us. "Just tired," I said quickly, stepping toward the door to bypass him. "The fumes, I think. I should probably get some fresh air." "Right, of course." He dropped his hand, his expression clouding with a flicker of confusion. "Go wash up. I'll go help her with the salad." I watched him walk away, his shoulders square and confident. He didn't look like a man carrying a secret. He looked like a husband worried about his pregnant wife. That was the most terrifying part. I went into the bathroom and turned the water on high. I scrubbed my hands until the skin was raw and pink, but the yellow paint under my fingernails refused to budge. I leaned over the sink staring at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes looked wider, darker. I looked like a stranger. I gripped the edges of the porcelain until my knuckles turned white. I had to go down there. I had to sit at that table and eat that roast and listen to Judith talk about the guest list for the baby shower. The dining room smelled of rosemary and garlic. Judith had already laid out the good linens, the ones with the delicate lace edges that she usually reserved for holidays. She was hovering over a platter of sliced beef, her movements precise and efficient. She wore a twin set in a soft shade of lavender, her pearls gleaming against her neck. When she saw me, she beamed, but the warmth never quite reached her eyes. "There she is," Judith said, pulling out my chair. "Sit down, Shay. You need your strength. Carrying a Keegan takes a lot out of a girl." I sat. The wooden chair felt hard and unforgiving. Mitchell sat opposite me, already pouring water into our glasses. "The room looks great, Mom," Mitchell said, nodding toward the ceiling. "Shay finished the painting today." Judith paused, a serving fork poised over the meat. "Yellow wasn't such a neutral choice. I still think a soft blue would have opened up the space, but it's your house, dear." "Mostly." I felt the prickle of heat at the back of my neck. Mostly. The word hung in the air, unacknowledged by Mitchell, who was busy reaching for the bread rolls. "I like the yellow," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "It feels like sunshine." "Well, sunshine is lovely until it hurts your eyes," Judith remarked with a thin smile. She placed 2 thick slices of beef on my plate. "Eat up. I noticed the hedges in the backyard are looking a bit shaggy, Mitchell. I might send the gardener over on Tuesday while you're at work." "That'd be great, Mom." "Thanks," Mitchell replied. I picked up my fork, staring at the red center of the beef. My stomach churned. I thought about the messages. He gets restless when she's around too much. "So, Mitchell," I said, looking up. He was mid-chew. "How was your run? Did you go the usual route through Washington Park?" He swallowed his Adam's apple, bobbing. "Yeah, same as always. A bit crowded near the rose garden, but the weather was perfect. Must be nice to have that time to yourself." I continued, my eyes shifting to Judith. She was watching me now, her fork held perfectly still. "To just disappear for a few hours and not have to answer to anyone. It helps clear my head," Mitchell said. He didn't look away, but I saw the way his grip tightened on his water glass. "I'm sure it does," I said. I took a bite of the roast. It tasted like ash. The dinner conversation drifted into talk of insurance and crib safety ratings. I played my part, nodding when expected, offering small smiles when Mitchell made a joke. I was an actress on a stage I hadn't realized I'd been cast in. Every time Judith reached out to pat my hand or Mitchell mentioned our future, I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. When the meal was finally over and the dishes were stacked in the dishwasher, Judith made her exit. She kissed Mitchell on the cheek and gave me a lingering squeeze on the shoulder. "Get some rest, Shay. You're glowing, but you look exhausted," she whispered. I watched her car pull out of the driveway, the red taillights disappearing into the Portland mist. Mitchell went into the living room to turn on the news, his routine as predictable as a heartbeat. "I forgot my iPad in the nursery," I called out to him, my heart starting its frantic dance again. "I'm going to grab it before I head to bed." "Okay, honey, don't trip over the paint trays," he shouted back. I climbed the stairs, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts. The nursery was dark now, the yellow walls turned to a muddy gold in the shadows. I didn't turn on the light. I navigated by the glow of the street lamp outside. I reached the changing table and pulled the iPad from its hiding spot. My thumb found the home button. The screen flared to life, blinding me for a second. I didn't go back to the messages. I went to the files. Mitchell was meticulous with his digital life, or so he thought. He had a folder marked household. I tapped it. Inside were PDFs of utility bills, tax returns, and a subfolder marked purchase agreement. I opened it. The document was 50 pages long. I scrolled past the legal jargon, past the addendums about the roof and the soil samples until I reached the signature page at the very end, the house on Skyline Boulevard. The house where I had spent 3 years dreaming of a family. The house where I had painted every room and planted every bulb in the garden. The signatures at the bottom were clear. Mitchell Keegan, Judith Keegan. My name was nowhere. There was no mention of Shay Donovan, no mention of a wife. I sat down on the floor, the cold hardwood biting into my legs. I scrolled back to the top of the deed. The purchase had been made 6 months before our wedding. Judith had provided the entire down payment. Mitchell had signed the mortgage. They had told me it was ours. They had let me believe I was a co-owner, a partner, an equal. I looked up at the yellow walls. They weren't my walls. This wasn't my nursery. I was a tenant in a museum dedicated to the Keegan family, and my only purpose was to provide the next exhibit. Downstairs, I heard the sound of the television being turned off. Mitchell's footsteps were headed toward the stairs. I tucked the iPad under my arm and stood up, my face cold and set. I had the passport, I had the records of the affair, I had the proof of the financial betrayal. The door to the nursery opened. Mitchell stood there in the dark, his silhouette framed by the hallway light. "Shay, you still up here?" I turned to face him, the iPad hidden behind my back. "Just thinking about the furniture layout," I said, my voice a flat, dead calm. "Come to bed," he said, stepping into the room. "The lawyer called while you were upstairs about the trust for the baby. He wants us to come in on Monday to sign the final papers." I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see my husband. I saw a stranger who had been paid to love me. "Monday," I repeated. "I'll be ready." The bedroom was silent save for the rhythmic, heavy breathing of Mitchell beside me. He slept with the easy peace of a man who believed his world was perfectly ordered, one arm flung carelessly over his head. I lay perfectly still, staring at the ceiling where the shadows of the Douglas firs outside danced in the moonlight. My stomach felt tight, the skin stretched thin, and Bean was quiet for once, as if she could sense the electricity humming through my nerves. Every time Mitchell shifted, my skin crawled. I looked at his hands, the same hands that had held mine during ultrasounds, and saw only the signatures on a deed that didn't include me. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed 3:15 in soft green numbers. I waited another 10 minutes, counting each breath, before I eased myself out from under the covers. My joints popped with a sound that seemed loud as a gunshot in the stillness. I didn't reach for my robe. I moved toward the closet, my feet silent on the thick carpet, and found the small leather crossbody bag I'd hidden behind my winter boots. I slipped out of the room, leaving the door ajar just a crack, so I could hear if he woke. The hallway was a tunnel of darkness. I didn't head for the nursery this time. I went down to the kitchen, where the air still held a faint, lingering scent of Judith's rosemary roast. It smelled like a trap. I went straight to the built-in desk in the corner of the breakfast nook, the place where Mitchell kept the mail he hadn't sorted yet. The stack was mostly junk catalogs for lawn furniture, flyers for local dentists, and white envelopes from utility companies. I flipped through them with cold, efficient fingers. Nothing. I opened the bottom drawer, the one filled with old takeout menus and spare batteries. Buried at the back was a heavy cream-colored envelope. It hadn't been through the mail system. There was no stamp, no postmark, just Mitchell written in a sharp slanted cursive that I recognized from the thank you notes Judith sent after every dinner party. I pulled out the contents. It wasn't a letter, it was a stack of Christmas cards, the kind people send when they want to show off a perfect life. But these weren't from friends. Each one featured the same woman, blonde, glowing, usually holding a glass of wine on a balcony somewhere tropical. In the most gun-hot one, she was standing in front of a Christmas tree, and her hand was resting on a slight swell of a stomach. Not as large as mine, but unmistakable. I turned the card over, thinking of our arrangement. "She looks healthy in the photos you sent. Only a few months left until we can finally be together as a real family. Love, S." The paper crinkled in my grip. "The photos you sent." Mitchell had been photographing me, my growing body, my private moments in the nursery, and sending them to this woman as if he were documenting the progress of a livestock investment. I felt a surge of heat in my chest, a physical pressure that made it hard to swallow. My jaw ached. I'd been clenching it so hard my teeth felt loose in their sockets. "Looking for something, dear?" The voice came from the doorway, sharp and cool. I didn't jump. I didn't even drop the card. I slowly turned to see Judith standing there in a silk dressing gown, her white hair perfectly coiffed even at 3 in the morning. She didn't look sleepy. She looked like a predator that had been waiting in the tall grass. "I couldn't sleep," I said, my voice low and steady. I slid the card back into the envelope, but I didn't put it back in the drawer. I kept it in my hand. "I was looking for the prenatal vitamins I thought I left down here." Judith stepped into the kitchen, the heels of her slippers clicking on the tile. She didn't look at the desk. She looked directly at me, her eyes tracking the movement of my hand as I tucked the envelope into the waistband of my maternity leggings. "You've been very restless lately, Shay," she said, walking to the counter to fill a glass of water. "It's not good for the baby. Stress can do terrible things to a developing mind. Mitchell is worried. I'm worried." "I'm fine, Judith," I replied. I moved toward the stairs, trying to keep my breathing even. "I'm just ready for this to be over." "It will be over soon enough," she said, taking a slow sip of water. She watched me over the rim of the glass. "Everything is being handled. You just need to focus on staying healthy for the home stretch. We have a very specific plan for when the time comes." "I'm sure you do," I whispered. I didn't go back to bed. I went into the nursery and locked the door. I sat in the white rocking chair and pulled the Christmas card out again. The home stretch. Our arrangement. My mind was racing, piecing together the fragments. The deed, the payments, the woman in the photos. I took out my phone and messaged a number I hadn't called in 2 years. Amanda. She had been Mitchell's assistant before Judith had her fired for a minor clerical error. At the time, I'd felt sorry for her, but I hadn't questioned it. Now I remembered the way Amanda had looked at me on her last day, a look of pity so profound it had made me uncomfortable. "I need to talk," I typed. "About Mitchell and Judith. I think you tried to tell me once. Please." I waited. The minutes crawled by. Outside, the first hint of gray began to bleed into the horizon. "Meet me at the diner on Hawthorne." 6 a.m., the reply finally came. I didn't take anything but my purse and the iPad. I left the nursery exactly as it was, the yellow walls glowing in the pre-dawn light. I walked down the stairs past the bedroom where Mitchell was still dreaming of a life that didn't include me and slipped out the front door. The morning air was biting, smelling of damp earth and pine. The diner was nearly empty, the smell of burnt coffee and bacon grease hanging heavy in the air. Amanda was sitting in a corner booth, her hair tucked under a beanie. She looked tired, but when she saw me, she sat up straighter. "You finally saw it, didn't you?" she asked before I even sat down. "I saw enough," I said, sliding into the vinyl seat. I laid the Christmas card on the table. "Who is she?" Amanda glanced at the photo and let out a short, bitter laugh. "That's Sarah, Mitchell's high school sweetheart. The one Judith always wanted for him, but Sarah's family didn't have the pedigree Judith required, at least not then. So they're together all this time." "Not just together, Shay. It's a business deal." Amanda leaned in, her voice a harsh whisper. "Sarah can't have children. Some complication years ago, and Judith needs an heir for the Keegan estate. A bloodline. But she needs one she can control. You are the perfect candidate. No family in the States, no brothers to come knocking. Just a girl from Ireland who was grateful for a nice house and a handsome husband." The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table. "You mean they married me just to be the vessel?" Amanda finished for me. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I kept this. I shouldn't have, but I knew I'd need it one day. It's a copy of a draft agreement I found on Mitchell's desk. It's not a trust for the baby, Shay. It's a surrender of parental rights. They're planning to declare you unfit after the birth. Postpartum depression, maybe. A history of instability they've been carefully documenting. Once you're out of the picture, Sarah steps in. The real mother. Mitchell gets the baby, Sarah gets the husband, and Judith gets the legacy." I took the paper. My hands were cold, so cold they felt numb. I scanned the lines, the legal terms blurred by the salt in my eyes that I refused to let fall. Irrevocable transfer. Sole custody to the father. Supervised visitation at the discretion of the paternal grandmother. I looked at Amanda. "How soon?" "They've already scheduled the induction for 38 weeks, Amanda said. 2 weeks from now. They want to control the timing. Once you go into that hospital, you aren't coming out with that baby, Shay." I looked out the window at the rainy Portland street. 2 weeks. I had 14 days to dismantle a trap that had been years in the making. I felt Bean move a solid, defiant kick against my ribs. "I'm not going to that hospital," I said, and for the first time in months, the weight in my chest felt like a weapon instead of a burden. I walked back to my car, the paper tucked into my bag next to my passport. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Mitchell. "Where are you? Mom's here. We're waiting for you to start breakfast." I stared at the screen. I could see them in my mind sitting at that mahogany table, smiling over their coffee, counting down the days until they could erase me. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going home to be a guest at my own execution. I had one more stop to make before I disappeared. I drove to the bank. I waited for the doors to open, and when they did, I walked straight to the safety deposit box Mitchell and I supposedly shared. I used my key. The box was heavy. Inside, I found exactly what I expected. The jewelry Judith had gifted me, the vintage diamonds, the gold bracelets, and beneath them a stack of cash Mitchell had been hoarding for his new life. I took it all, every cent, every stone. As I walked out of the bank, my phone rang again. It wasn't Mitchell this time. It was an unknown number. I answered. "Hello, Shay, it's Dana from the real estate office," the voice said, sounding hurried. "I was looking over the file for the Skyline property like you asked. There's something you need to see. The deed you found, it's the current one, but there's a secondary lien filed last month, a private loan. Mitchell took out a $300,000 line of credit against the house, and the money was transferred to an offshore account in the Caymans 2 days ago." I stood on the sidewalk, the rain soaking through my coat. He wasn't just planning to take the baby. He was draining the assets before the divorce he knew was coming. He was leaving me with nothing, no house, no money, and no daughter. "Thanks, Dana," I said. "Keep that file ready." I hung up and looked at the gray sky. They thought I was a girl who played by the rules. They thought I was a girl who would break when the pressure got too high. They had forgotten one thing. I was my mother's daughter, and Orla Donovan hadn't raised a victim. I got back in the car and started the engine. I had a week to find a way out of the country, a way to keep my baby, and a way to make sure Judith Keegan never saw a single centimeter of the legacy she was so desperate to protect. My phone lit up with another call from Mitchell. I watched it vibrate on the passenger seat until it went to voicemail. "The light is changing, Bean," I whispered, pulling out into traffic. "And we're not waiting for them to tell us when to go. Would you like me to continue with part 4, where Shay begins her countermove and begins to look for a way to escape the country before the scheduled induction?" The windshield wipers slapped against the glass, a rhythmic metronome counting down the seconds of my hesitation. I sat in the parking lot of a brick building in downtown Portland, the engine idling. My bag heavy with the cash and jewelry I'd pulled from the safety deposit box sat on the passenger seat like a second passenger. I had driven around for an hour, the adrenaline of the morning fading into a cold, hard clarity. Running was what Orla, my mother, would have done. Running meant leaving everything behind: my home, my name, the life I had built. I turned off the engine. I wasn't running. I was rewriting the ending. Dana Nolan's office smelled of old paper and lemon polish. It was a small space cluttered with files, the kind of room where battles were fought in inches of paperwork rather than shouting matches. Dana sat across from me, her glasses perched on the end of her nose as she reviewed the stack of documents I had laid out. She didn't look like a savior. She looked like a mechanic inspecting a totaled car. "This affidavit from Aubrey," Dana said, tapping a single sheet of paper with her pen. "You're sure she'll testify to this, that Judith Keegan paid her specifically to initiate the affair?" "She kept the Venmo receipts," I said. I pushed the printouts across the desk. $2,000 a month, labeled consulting. The dates matched the text messages on Mitchell's phone exactly, and she signed the statement. "She's angry, Dana. Judith stopped paying her the moment she thought the hook was set." Dana picked up the receipts, her eyes scanning the columns. "Oregon is a no-fault divorce state. Generally, the court doesn't care who slept with whom, but this..." She looked up, and for the first time her professional mask slipped. "This is dissipation of marital assets for the purpose of sabotaging the marriage. It's interference, and it proves a pattern of behavior that will make a judge very uncomfortable regarding custody." "And the house?" I asked. Dana pulled the deed from the bottom of the pile. "Shay Donovan, sole owner, purchased 14 months prior to the marriage. Funds sourced from inheritance and premarital savings." She set the paper down and folded her hands. "It's separate property. He can't touch it. He can't claim equity in it. Legally, he's a guest. So I can sell it." "Technically, yes, it's yours." Dana paused, leaning forward. "But if you list it now, if you put a sign in the yard, you tip your hand. They'll know you're making a move. If Mitchell files for emergency custody before the baby is born, claiming you're unstable or planning to abscond, he won't know," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat, devoid of the tremor that had been there this morning. "I'm not putting a sign in the yard. I'm not leaving today. I'm going back." Dana raised an eyebrow. "You're going back to that house to live with him?" "I have 8 weeks until my due date," I said. I reached for the folder, closing it over the evidence of my husband's betrayal. If I leave now, I'm the pregnant wife who ran away with the family jewelry. If I stay, I'm the victim who was blindsided. I need that house sold, and I need the money in an account they can't touch. And I need to do it while Judith thinks she's winning. Dana looked at me for a long moment. Then she opened her drawer and pulled out a fresh legal pad. Okay, if you can stomach it, we build the file, we prep the custody petition, we have everything ready to file the moment the birth certificate is signed. But you have to be perfect, Shay. No outbursts, no slip-ups. You have to be the happy nesting mother until the minute you walk out that door. I can do that, I said. I touched the claddagh ring on my finger, turning it so the heart faced inward. I've been watching them do it for years. The coffee shop was 3 blocks from the house, a place where the baristas knew my order, and the music was always soft jazz. I sat in the back corner, my back to the wall. The woman sitting across from me didn't look like a conspirator. She looked like a soccer mom with a sensible bob and a binder full of glossies. A pocket listing, the realtor, a woman named Carol repeated. She kept her voice low, blending with the hiss of the espresso machine. It's unusual for a property in this price bracket, especially without an open house. But the market is hungry. Cash buyers prefer the privacy. I need it done quietly, I said. No sign, no online listing, showings only when I say, and a 30-day close. Carol tapped her pen against her lip. The comps on Skyline are strong. If the interior is as updated as you say, it is. I did most of it myself. Then we can price it at $420. If we get a cash offer, we can skip the appraisal contingency. That speeds things up. She slid a contract across the small metal table. You're the sole owner on the title, yes? And your husband, he's not involved in this decision. Carol didn't blink. In her line of work, I imagine she saw a lot of women sitting in coffee shops, selling houses their husbands didn't know were for sale. She pointed to the signature line. I have a few investors in mind. People who want the land, not the story. I can make some calls this afternoon. I signed my name, Shay Donovan. The ink looked dark and permanent against the white paper. One more thing, I said, capping the pen. The closing date. It has to be after mid-January. Carol checked her calendar. That's tight, but for a cash deal, it's doable. I handed the binder back. Get me an offer. The house was quiet when I returned. Mitchell's car was gone, back at work, back to his routine, back to pretending he wasn't plotting to take my child. I walked into the hallway, the smell of Judith's perfume still faint in the air, a ghostly reminder of her presence. I walked up the stairs. My legs felt heavy, the physical toll of the day finally catching up to me. I went into the nursery. The room glowed. The afternoon sun hit the primrose yellow walls, turning the space into a warm, golden box. It was beautiful. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever made, and it was a lie. I picked up the small paintbrush I had left on the sill. The ceiling was still unfinished, a patch of white, waiting for the stars I had promised. I dragged the stepladder to the center of the room. I shouldn't have been climbing ladders at 34 weeks, but I didn't care. I dipped the brush into the silver paint. I didn't need a stencil. I knew the constellations by heart. Orla used to point them out to me through the skylight of our flat in Galway. Orion the hunter, Cassiopeia the queen. I painted them both. I painted the belt of the hunter strong and bright. I painted the jagged W of the queen, a throne of stars. I painted them for Bean, so that even if she never slept in this room, even if she never saw this house again, she would have her stars. My arm burned. Sweat trickled down my back. I painted until the light began to fade, turning the yellow walls to amber. When I climbed down, I sat in the rocking chair. The wood creaked a sound that felt like a heartbeat. I looked around the room, the crib Judith had picked out, the changing table where I had hidden the evidence, the walls I had smoothed and sanded. I wasn't just building a nursery. I was building a stage set, a backdrop for a play that would end with an empty house. I took out my phone. I didn't text Mitchell. I opened the camera. I took a photo of the crib. I took a photo of the sunlight hitting the floor. I took a photo of the stars on the ceiling. I archived them in the 4Bean folder. Someday I would show her. This is what I made for you. This is what we left behind to save ourselves. The phone buzzed in my hand. A call from Carol. I answered, my voice steady. Hello. I made the calls, Carol said. She sounded breathless. I have a buyer, an investor from Seattle. He knows the neighborhood. He's offering $415 all cash, no contingencies. He can close on the 14th of January. I looked at the silver stars above me. January 14th, 4 days after my due date. Send me the paperwork, I said. Shay. Carol hesitated. You're sure? Once you sign, there's no going back. The house is sold. I placed my hand on my stomach. Bean was quiet now, lulled by the motion of the chair. I'm sure, I said. It was never really my home anyway. I hung up. Downstairs, the garage door rumbled open. Mitchell was home. I stood up, wiped the silver paint from my thumb, and put a smile on my face. It was time for the performance of my life. The induction began on a Tuesday morning under a sky the color of wet slate. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and the faint metallic scent of fear that I tried to mask with the lavender essential oil diffuser Judith had insisted on bringing. She called it soothing. To me, it smelled like a funeral parlor. My body was no longer my own. It had become a medical landscape to be mapped, monitored, and discussed by people who didn't look me in the eye. The Pitocin drip was a clear line of fluid running into the vein of my left hand, a chemical tether binding me to the bed. Every drop that fell into the chamber was a countdown forcing my body into a rhythm it wasn't ready for. 38 weeks. That was the timeline Judith had decided on, citing the size of the baby and the convenience of the doctor's schedule. But I knew the truth. They wanted this baby out. They wanted the separation to begin. Mitchell sat in the uncomfortable vinyl recliner in the corner, scrolling through his phone. He wore his supportive husband costume well. The concerned furrow of the brow, the hand squeezing mine when a nurse walked in. But the moment the door clicked shut, he retreated into the blue light of his screen. I watched his thumbs move. He wasn't texting work. He was texting her, updating the inventory, dilated to 4, water broke. Almost time. You're doing beautifully, dear, Judith said. She was perched on a stool right next to the bed, closer than my husband. She had a crossword puzzle in her lap, but she hadn't written a word in an hour. Her eyes were fixed on the fetal monitor, watching the green jagged line of my daughter's heartbeat, as if she were auditing a bank statement. Just breathe through it. Remember what the class taught you. Focus. A contraction seized me, a band of iron tightening around my lower spine and crushing the air from my lungs. I didn't breathe through it. I gripped the side rails of the bed until my knuckles turned the color of bone. I didn't look at Mitchell. I didn't look at Judith. I looked at the ceiling tile directly above me, counting the small random perforations. 1, 2, 3. You are not keeping her. 4, 5, 6. I am leaving. The pain was a clarifying fire. It burned away the last remnants of the doubt I had carried for weeks. It burned away the girl who wanted to be liked, the wife who wanted to be good. All that was left was the animal instinct to survive and protect. The hours bled into one another, a blur of shifting shifts and escalating pressure. When the time finally came, the room filled with people. The lights seemed to get brighter, harsh, and exposing. Mitchell was at my shoulder, whispering encouragements that sounded like lines from a script he hadn't bothered to memorize. Judith was at the foot of the bed. I tried to kick her out. I tried to say the words, "Get out, just get out," but the pain was a tidal wave now, drowning my voice. Push, Shay! Push! I pushed. I pushed not just to bring my child into the world, but to push all of them away. I pushed against the lies, against the debt, against the empty nursery waiting in a sold house. And then a sound. It was a wet, angry gurgle that blossomed into a high, thin cry. The pressure vanished, replaced by a sudden, terrifying hollowness in my stomach. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, holding up a small, writhing creature slick with fluids. "A girl," Mitchell repeated, his voice cracked. For a second, just a second, he sounded like the man I fell in love with. "Mom, look, it's a girl." They placed her on my chest. She was tiny, hot, and heavy. Her skin was mottled purple and red, her eyes squeezed shut against the glare. She smelled of iron and the ocean. I wrapped my arms around her, forming a cage with my body. "My baby," I whispered. My throat was raw. "Bean." Judith was there instantly, her face hovering over mine, invading the intimate bubble of skin-to-skin contact. She reached out a manicured finger to stroke the baby's damp head. "A granddaughter," Judith breathed. "Welcome, little one. We have so much ready for you." She looked up at me, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "What's the name, Shay Mitchell?" And I discussed Elizabeth. "It's classic. Strong." I looked down at the tiny face against my breast. I saw my chin, I saw my mother's nose. She didn't look like a Keegan. She looked like she belonged to the wind and the rain of the Atlantic coast. Saoirse, I said. The name came out hard. A stone dropped into a quiet pool. Judith blinked. Excuse me. Saoirse. I repeated, spelling it out in my head. Saoirse. It's Irish. It means freedom. Saoirse. Mitchell stumbled over the pronunciation. It's a bit difficult, isn't it, babe, for spelling for school? She's Irish, I said, looking directly at Judith. She'll learn to spell it. And so will everyone else. Judith's smile tightened at the corners, a hairline fracture in her porcelain mask. Well, we can call her Sari for short, or maybe use her middle name, Saoirse, I said again, closing my eyes and resting my cheek against the top of my daughter's head. I didn't offer a middle name. I didn't offer a compromise. I held on to her, feeling the rapid flutter of her heart against my own, and I knew the war had officially moved from the planning stages to the battlefield. The hospital stay was a 48-hour siege. I didn't sleep. Every time I dozed off, I would jerk awake, terrified that she was gone, that they had taken her to the nursery and simply never brought her back. I kept the bassinet pinned between my bed and the wall, forcing anyone who wanted to see her to go through me. Judith visited 4 times a day. She brought food. I didn't eat rich, heavy casseroles that smelled of cream and control. She brought baby clothes. I didn't put on her stiff, ruffled pink dresses that looked like costumes for a doll. You need to rest, Shay, she told me on the second afternoon, watching me struggle to breastfeed. Saoirse was crying, frustration making her tiny body rigid. You're exhausted. Your milk probably hasn't even come in properly. Let the nurses give her a bottle. Just for tonight, so you can sleep. She's feeding fine, I lied. The latch hurt. My nipples were cracked and bleeding, but I wasn't giving up the one thing only I could provide. The bottle was the first step to making me unnecessary. If she took a bottle, she could go to Mitchell. If she went to Mitchell, she went to Judith. I'm just thinking of the baby. Judith sighed, sitting back in the chair and smoothing her skirt. A stressed mother makes for a stressed child. You seem very on edge. Have you spoken to the social worker? They have resources for postpartum anxiety. My head snapped up. Postpartum anxiety. There it was. The seed being planted. I'm not anxious, I said, my voice level. I'm a new mother. I'm alert. Of course, dear. Whatever you say. She pulled out her phone and tapped out a quick message. I watched her thumbs. Documenting. She was documenting my refusal of help. She was documenting my instability. When they finally discharged us, the drive home felt like a funeral procession. Mitchell drove. Judith followed in her car behind us, a sleek silver Predator in the rear-view mirror. I sat in the back seat next to the car seat, my hand resting on Saoirse's chest, checking her breath every stoplight. The house on Skyline Boulevard looked exactly the same as when we left it, but to me it felt like walking into a film set that was about to be struck. The primrose yellow walls of the nursery waited. The constellation map I had painted on the ceiling waited. I'll take my bags to the guest room, Judith announced the moment we walked through the door. She didn't ask. She informed. She had a suitcase, a large one. I'm staying for the first 2 weeks. We agreed, remember, you'll need the help. We didn't agree, I started to say, but Mitchell cut me off. Just let her stay, Shay, he said, dropping the baby bag on the floor. He looked tired, his patience fraying at the edges. I have to go back to work on Monday. You can't do this alone. I have done everything alone, I thought. I bought this house alone. I saved the money alone. I discovered your affair alone. Fine, I said. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 14 days. The countdown in my head reset. I had to finalize the sale, get the passports ready, and get to the airport before Judith decided 2 weeks should become forever. The first 3 days at home were a blur of sleeplessness and physical pain. My body felt like it had been torn apart and stitched back together wrong, bleeding, cramping, the constant stinging ache of nursing. I lived in my bathrobe, my hair in a messy knot, smelling of sour milk and sweat. Judith, by contrast, was immaculate. She rose at 6, she made coffee, she vacuumed. She was the perfect grandmother, and it made me look like a wreck. She tried to take over the nursery. The room is too bright, she said, standing in the doorway while I changed Saoirse's diaper. Yellow is stimulating. She needs calm. I brought some blackout curtains. I'll have Mitchell put them up. She likes the light, I said. She likes to look at the shadows. She's 3 days old, Shay. She can't see past her own nose. Judith walked into the room. and picked up the wipes warmer. And this is empty. You have to keep it full. Cold wipes shock the system. She moved around the room, straightening things I had just put down, rearranging the drawers I had organized. It was a territorial display. She was marking the space with her scent, her order, her logic. Here, she said, holding out her arms. Let me take her while you shower. You smell ripe. I looked down at my stained robe. I did smell. I felt gross and subhuman. I'm okay. I'll shower when she sleeps. She is sleeping, Judith pointed out. Saoirse's eyes were closed, her mouth making small sucking motions in her sleep. Give her to me, Shay. Don't be a martyr. It's not healthy. She stepped forward and put her hands on the baby. It wasn't a request. She was taking her. Her hands were cool and dry, her grip firm. I felt a surge of panic, irrational and sharp, but I forced myself to let go. If I fought her on everything, I looked crazy. I had to pick my battles. 10 minutes, I said. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Take your time, Judith cooed, pulling Saoirse against her cashmere shoulder. Grandma's got you. Grandma's got you now. I went to the bathroom and turned on the shower. I didn't get in. I sat on the closed toilet lid and cried. I cried silently, shaking with the force of it, muffling the sound with a towel. I let myself fall apart for exactly 4 minutes. Then I stood up, I washed my face with cold water, I brushed my teeth, I put on fresh nursing pads. I was not a victim. I was a spy in my own house. I walked out of the bathroom and didn't go straight to the nursery, I went to the master bedroom. Mitchell was at work, but his iPad was on the nightstand. He had stopped taking it with him, assuming I was too busy with the baby to snoop. I picked it up. My fingers flew across the screen. I didn't look at the text with the other woman. I knew about the affair. I needed to know about the plan. I opened his email. There was a thread with a subject line that made my blood run cold. Keegan versus Donovan. Draft petition. I opened the attachment. It was dated 3 days ago. Mother exhibits signs of severe postpartum instability, refusal of familial support, obsessive behavior regarding the infant, requesting immediate temporary custody be granted to the father pending psychiatric evaluation, obsessive behavior, refusal of support. Everything Judith was doing, offering to hold the baby, offering food, rearranging the room, was a test. And every time I said no, every time I insisted on doing it myself, I was failing. I was giving them the evidence they needed to paint me as paranoid and unfit. I heard footsteps on the stairs. I dropped the iPad back onto the nightstand and moved toward the pile of laundry on the chair just as Judith walked past the door. Oh, you're done, she said, pausing. She wasn't holding the baby. Where is she? My voice was sharp, too sharp. She's in the crib. She fell asleep instantly. See, she just needed to be settled properly. Judith smiled, a tight, condescending expression. I put the monitor on. Why don't you come down and have some tea? I made chamomile. I'm going to check on her, I said. Shay. Judith's voice dropped an octave. It was the principal's voice now. You just checked on her 10 minutes ago. If you go in there, you'll wake her up. You need to learn to let go. Learn to let go. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had hired a mistress for her son, who had orchestrated the end of my marriage, who was currently gaslighting me into a courtroom defeat. I forced the muscles in my face to relax. I forced my shoulders to drop. I channeled every ounce of strength I had left. You're right, I said. I sounded tired. I sounded defeated. You're right, Judith. I'm so tired. I don't know what I'm doing. Judith's face softened, not with kindness, but with satisfaction. She had won the round. Of course you don't. No one does the first time. That's why I'm here. She gestured toward the stairs. Come. Tea. I followed her down the stairs. I drank her tea. I listened to her talk about sleep training methods and the proper way to sterilize bottles. I nodded. I apologized for being difficult. I played the role of the overwhelmed, grateful daughter-in-law. But in my head, I was counting. 5 days until the closing papers are signed. 7 days until the passport office opens for expedited processing. 10 days until I never have to see your face again. That night, the house was silent. Mitchell was snoring, a sound that used to comfort me, but now sounded like the growl of a sleeping guard dog. I slipped out of bed. I didn't go to the nursery. I went to the guest room door. It was cracked open. Judith was asleep. But on the floor next to her suitcase was a stack of file folders. She had brought work, or so she said. I crept into the room. My bare feet made no sound on the carpet. I held my breath. I reached for the top folder. It wasn't work. It was medical records. My medical records. Copies of my prenatal visits, notes from the hospital social worker, the one Judith had flagged down in the hallway while I was sleeping. Grandmother expresses concern regarding mother's lack of affect. Mother refuses to let infant leave sight. Potential risk of flight. Flight risk. They knew, or they suspected. I put the folder back. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would wake her. I backed out of the room. I went to the nursery. The room was dark, the blackout curtains Judith had hung blocking out the moonlight. I couldn't see the stars I had painted on the ceiling. It felt like a tomb. I walked to the crib. Saoirse was a small, dark lump in the center of the mattress. I reached out and touched her chest, needing to feel the rise and fall. She breathed. She was alive. She was mine. I sat in the rocking chair, pulling my knees up to my chest. I took out my phone. I opened the Project Primrose file. I added a new note. They are building a case for insanity. They are going to strike before the month is out. I cannot wait for the house closing. I had to move the timeline up. I had the cash from the safety deposit box. It wasn't enough for a house in Ireland, but it was enough for tickets. It was enough for a start. But I couldn't leave yet. I needed the passport for the baby, and to get the passport, I needed Mitchell's signature on the application form. Or I needed a court order. Or I needed him to be gone. I looked at the iPad sitting on the changing table. Judith had left it there, probably playing lullabies earlier. I picked it up. It was synced to her account now, not Mitchell's. She must have logged in to control the music. I opened her messages. There was a thread with a contact simply labeled lawyer. Judith. The induction went well. She is exhausted, weak. Lawyer good. Keep pressure on the instability angle. If we can get a 72-hour hold for observation, we get temporary custody automatically. Judith. I'm working on it. She's cracking. A few more days of sleep deprivation should do it. A chill went through me that had nothing to do with the drafty window. They weren't just going to take the baby. They were going to have me committed. They were going to lock me up so I couldn't fight back. Sleep deprivation. I looked at the baby monitor sitting on the shelf. The little green light blinked innocently. I realized then why I was so tired, why Saoirse cried so much at night. I walked over to the monitor. I turned it over. The volume was set to max, but there was something else. A setting for two-way talk. I remembered waking up 2 nights ago to the sound of music. Loud, jarring music. I thought I had dreamt it. Judith. She was using the monitor to wake the baby up, to wake me up, to break me down. I didn't smash the monitor. I didn't scream. I unplugged it. I wrapped the cord around the base. I put it in the drawer. I picked up Saoirse. She stirred, making a small, soft noise. We're going to have a sleepover, Bean, I whispered. I carried her into the walk-in closet in the master bedroom. It was the only room with a lock that Mitchell couldn't open from the outside easily. The latch was sticky. I made a nest of blankets on the floor. I locked the door. I sat there in the dark, my back against the door, my baby in my arms. I listened to the house settle. I listened to the silence of the enemy sleeping in the rooms I had paid for. They wanted a crazy woman. They wanted an unstable mother. I would give them a performance that would win an Oscar. I would be so unstable, so fragile, that they would let their guard down. I would let Judith think she had won. I would let Mitchell think I was broken. And while they were celebrating their victory, while they were preparing the papers to lock me away, I would vanish. I looked down at Saoirse. In the dark, I couldn't see her face, but I could feel her warmth. Freedom. I whispered the name again. I promise. The next morning, I would start crying. I would stop showering. I would ask Judith for help. I would ask for the pills. And I would spit every single one of them into the drain. The game had changed. It wasn't about the house anymore. It wasn't about the money. It was about survival. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I waited for the sun to come up on the yellow walls, and I plotted my escape from the nursery. The pill tasted bitter under my tongue. It was a small, chalky white disc, the generic sedative Judith had retrieved from her own purse, claiming it was just something herbal to take the edge off. I sat at the kitchen island, my shoulders slumped forward, in a posture of defeat. I had been perfecting for 3 days. My hair was unwashed, pulled back in a knot that was coming loose, and I wore the same gray sweatpants I had put on Tuesday. "Drink up, dear," Judith said. She stood at the sink, rinsing a teaspoon with the meticulous circular motions of a woman who scrubbed away sins as easily as tea stains. "It will help you sleep. You were pacing the hallway until 3 in the morning again. It's not healthy. I picked up the glass of water. My hand trembled. That was a nice touch, I thought. The tremble was good. I took a sip, letting the water wash around the pill I had tucked safely between my gum and cheek, then swallowed audibly. "Thank you," I whispered. My voice was risky. I hear her crying, even when she's not. Judith turned off the faucet and dried her hands on a linen towel. She turned to look at me, her expression a mask of practiced concern that didn't quite cover the calculation underneath. She was wearing a crisp navy blouse and cream trousers, not a wrinkle in sight, despite the fact that she had been living in my house for a week. "That's the anxiety talking, Shay," she said softly. "Phantom cries. It's a classic symptom of postpartum psychosis. I read about it in the pamphlet the doctor gave us." She was laying the groundwork. Brick by brick, she was building the wall that would separate me from my daughter. I could feel the mortar drying. "I'm going to go lie down," I said, standing up. I swayed slightly, grabbing the counter for support. "Good. Mitchell will be home in an hour. I'll make sure the house is quiet so you can get a solid nap." She smiled, but her eyes drifted to the baby monitor sitting on the counter. The green light pulsed. "I'll watch Saoirse." I walked up the stairs, every step a heavy, dragging effort. I made it to the master bedroom, closed the door, and immediately went to the ensuite bathroom. I spit the half-dissolved pill into the toilet and flushed. I watched the water swirl away, taking Judith's poison with it. I splashed cold water on my face. The woman in the mirror looked haggard. Dark circles bruised the skin under my eyes, and my lips were pale. I didn't have to act much. The fear was doing the work for me. I opened the bathroom door a crack. I needed to check the timeline. I had hidden the laptop under the mattress on my side of the bed, buried beneath the box spring where the dust ruffle concealed it. I needed to confirm the flight times for the day after tomorrow. I needed to check if the transfer from the house sale had cleared the escrow account. I crept across the room. The house was silent. Downstairs, I could hear the faint hum of the vacuum. Judith was cleaning. She was always cleaning. I lifted the mattress corner. My hand met nothing but air. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs, a sudden violent kick that knocked the breath out of me. I felt around, shoving my arm deeper into the dark space between the mattress and the frame. Empty! I dropped the mattress. I looked around the room. The nightstand drawers were closed. The closet door was shut. Everything looked undisturbed, but the air felt different. It felt violated. I walked to the bedroom door and listened. The vacuum had stopped. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear the television. I heard a voice, low, distinct, coming from the nursery down the hall. I moved. I didn't shuffle this time. I walked on the balls of my feet, silent as a ghost. The nursery door was ajar. A sliver of afternoon light cut across the hallway floor. I pushed the door open, inches at a time. Judith was sitting in my rocking chair. She wasn't rocking. She was holding my laptop on her knees. The screen cast a blue, sterile glow on her face, illuminating the lines around her mouth that were set in a grim, hard line. She wasn't looking at the baby. Saoirse was asleep in the crib, oblivious. Judith was scrolling. I saw the reflection in her reading glasses. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It wasn't a recipe. It was the folder. For Bean. She had found it. The screenshots of the texts, the photos of the nursery stars, the copies of the deed, the scanned passport application. I stood there paralyzed. I should have run. I should have grabbed the baby and bolted. But my legs wouldn't move. I was watching the bomb go off in slow motion. Judith stopped scrolling. She didn't turn around. She didn't jump. She simply closed the laptop with a soft snap. "You have been very busy, Shay," she said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was disappointed. It was the voice of a principal holding a suspension slip. She swiveled the chair around. She took off her reading glasses and folded them neatly, placing them on top of the closed computer. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time I saw the true depth of her coldness. There was no warmth, no fake grandmotherly affection, just a flat, predatory assessment. "How long?" she asked. I stepped into the room. The floorboards creaked under my weight. I stopped pretending to be weak. I straightened my spine. I let the exhaustion drop from my face, replacing it with the cold, hard anger I had been nursing for 10 weeks. "Since the paint," I said. "Since the day I painted the last wall yellow, the iPad synced." Judith nodded slowly, as if this confirmed a theory she had long held. Technological oversight. Mitchell never was good with details. He gets that from his father. You paid her, I said. My voice was steady, clearer than it had been in days. $2,000 a month. I have the receipts, Judith. I have the texts where you told her exactly how to play him, where you told her I wouldn't find out because I trusted him. Judith didn't flinch. She didn't deny it. She didn't look ashamed. She looked bored. I helped him, she corrected. Mitchell was drowning. You were difficult, withdrawn. You didn't understand what it meant to be part of this family. He needed an outlet. I simply ensured that the outlet was someone manageable, someone temporary. You hired a prostitute to destroy my marriage so you could keep your son. I hired a companion to save my son's happiness. She snapped the first crack in her veneer. And to ensure that my grandchild was born into a stable environment. Not one where the mother is plotting to run away to a damp little island with no prospects. She tapped the laptop. I saw the passport application, Shay. I saw the flight search. Dublin. One way. She shook her head, a gesture of pity. Did you really think we would let you take her? Did you think you could just walk out of here with a Keegan? She's a Donovan, I said. I took a step toward the crib. And I am taking her. Judith stood up. She moved faster than I expected, blocking the path to the crib. She wasn't frail. She was solid, a wall of cashmere and iron will. You aren't taking anything, she said. Look at you. You're hysterical. You're hallucinating. You've been hiding pills in the bathroom. Oh yes, I checked the toilet. You're not sleeping. You're paranoid. I'm not paranoid if you're actually doing it, I said, my fists clenching at my sides. Who will believe you? Judith asked softly. Mitchell? The courts, you have no job. You have no family here. You have a history of trauma. Your mother's death, your solitary upbringing. And now you have a documented case of severe postpartum depression. The social worker has already noted your erratic behavior, the refusal of food, the obsession with the baby. I have the evidence, I said. The Venmo payments, the deed to the house, which is in my name, by the way. Judith laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. The house, you think this is about the house. Keep the house, Shay. Sell it, burn it down. We don't care about the real estate. We care about the bloodline. She took a step toward me, forcing me back toward the doorway. And as for your evidence, she continued, what does it prove that I helped my son financially, that I gave money to a young woman in need? You think a judge is going to look at a few out-of-context text messages and hand a baby over to a woman who is planning to kidnap her across international lines? She leaned in close. I could smell the Estee Lauder perfume, heavy and cloying, masking the scent of the baby powder in the room. You remind me so much of Amanda, she whispered. The name hung in the air between us. I know about Amanda, I said. I know you did this to her too. Amanda was weak, Judith spat. She couldn't handle the pressure. She broke, just like you are breaking. But Amanda had the good sense to leave alone. She didn't try to steal what wasn't hers. Saoirse is mine. She is a Keegan, Judith said. And she will stay a Keegan. The sound of the front door opening downstairs shattered the tension. Honey, Mom. Mitchell's voice floated up the stairs, cheerful and oblivious. I'm home early. I picked up dinner. Judith's face transformed instantly. The hardness evaporated. Her shoulders slumped. Her eyes filled with sudden glistening tears. She looked at me with an expression of terrified concern. Mitchell! She cried out, her voice trembling. Mitchell, come quickly. It's Shay. No, I said. I tried to push past her to the crib, but she caught my arm. Her grip was like a vice. Get off me, I yelled. I shoved her. It wasn't a hard shove, just a desperate attempt to break free, but Judith threw herself back. She stumbled, hitting her hip against the changing table with a loud thud, and collapsed onto the floor. Mom! Mitchell was running up the stairs. Judith lay on the rug, clutching her hip, looking up at me with wide, fearful eyes. I just wanted to hold the baby, she whimpered. She was screaming. She wouldn't let me. Mitchell burst into the room. He took in the scene, his mother on the floor, me standing over her with wild hair and clenched fists, the baby waking up and starting to cry in the crib. What the hell is going on? Mitchell shouted. He dropped to his knees beside Judith. Mom, are you okay? I'm fine, Judith gasped, clinging to his arm. She snapped, Mitchell. She started talking about spies, about people watching her. I tried to calm her down, and she shoved me. I didn't shove her, I screamed. The anger finally exploded. She's lying, Mitchell. She knows I found the messages. She knows about Aubrey. Mitchell froze. He looked up at me, his face pale. What? He said. The iPad, I said, pointing to the laptop still sitting on the rocking chair. The messages. I saw them, Mitchell. I saw everything. The payments, the setup. She hired her. She paid Aubrey to sleep with you. I was panning, the words tumbling out over each other. I sounded crazy. I knew I sounded crazy, but I couldn't stop. She's been controlling you, I said. She did it to Amanda, and now she's doing it to me. Look at the laptop, Mitchell. Look at the folder. Mitchell stood up slowly. He looked at the laptop. Then he looked at me. His eyes were hard. There was no guilt in them. There was only annoyance. You went through my phone, he asked. What? I blinked. Did you hear me? She paid a woman to… You hacked my accounts. Mitchell stepped closer, his voice rising. You've been spying on me, on my mother. I was protecting myself. Protecting yourself. He laughed a sharp, bitter bark. From what? From your family. You're sick, Shay. Mom was right. You've lost it. I haven't lost it. Look at the evidence. I grabbed the laptop and thrust it at him. Read it. Mitchell slapped the laptop out of my hand. It hit the floor with a sickening crack. The screen shattered. The room went silent except for the baby's wailing. I don't need to read your paranoid delusions, Mitchell said. He was breathing hard. I know about the messages, Shay. I stared at him. You know, Mom told me, he said. He looked down at Judith, who was slowly getting to her feet, looking frail and shaken. She told me she was helping Aubrey out, that Aubrey was threatening to blackmail us. Mom paid her off to keep her quiet, to protect you. To protect this marriage, my mouth fell open. The lie was so audacious, so perfectly crafted that it took my breath away. She had spun the story before I even knew there was a story to tell. She had turned herself into the hero and me into the villain. That's not true, I whispered. The texts, she said, it's working. She said she trusts him. Context, Shay, Mitchell yelled. God, you twist everything to fit this narrative where you're the victim. You're obsessed with being the outsider. You always have been. He walked over to the crib. Saoirse was screaming now, her face red and wet. Don't touch her, I said. I moved to intercept him. Mitchell turned on me. He was bigger than me, stronger than me, and for the first time I was afraid of him. He put a hand on my chest and shoved me back. I stumbled into the doorframe. You are not safe to be around her right now, he said. His voice was cold. Look at you. You just attacked an old woman. You're screaming. You're violent. He picked up the baby. He held her awkwardly, not like a father, but like someone securing a package. I am taking her downstairs, he said. Mom is going to call the doctor. No! I lunged for him. Judith stepped in between us. She wasn't limping anymore. She stood tall, her eyes like flint. Go, Mitchell, she said. Take the baby to the car. We're going to my house. It's not safe here. You can't take her, I screamed. I tried to push past Judith, but she grabbed my wrists. Her nails dug into my skin, sharp and painful. Stop it, she hissed. Her face was inches from mine. If you fight us, I will call the police right now. I will tell them you threatened to kill the baby. I will show them the bruises on my hip. Do you want to go to jail, Shay? Or do you want to go to the hospital? I froze. The threat was real. I could see it in her eyes. She would do it. She would have me arrested. Mitchell, I pleaded, looking over Judith's shoulder. He was in the hallway holding Saoirse. Please, she's hungry. She needs me. Mitchell didn't look back. He walked down the stairs. I heard the front door open. I heard the rain. I heard the door close. The silence that followed was deafening. Judith let go of my wrists. She smoothed her blouse. She walked over to the shattered laptop and nudged it with her toe. You really should have taken the pills, dear, she said softly. It would have been so much easier for everyone. She walked to the door. She paused, her hand on the frame. I'm going to lock this door from the outside, she said, for your own safety. The social worker will be here in the morning with the papers for the 72-hour hold. We'll tell them you had a breakdown. We'll tell them we had to remove the child for her protection. You can't keep me here, I said. My voice was shaking. It's my house, she said simply. Mitchell signed the deed over to me yesterday. Did you miss that in your little investigation? He wanted to make sure his assets were protected from his unstable wife. She stepped out. The door clicked shut. I heard the key turn in the lock. I was alone. I ran to the window. I pressed my face against the glass. Down below in the driveway, I saw Mitchell strapping the car seat into Judith's silver sedan. I saw Judith walk out holding an umbrella over her head, calm and composed. She got into the driver's seat. Mitchell got into the passenger side. They backed out of the driveway. They didn't look up. They drove away, taking my daughter, taking my life, taking the air from my lungs. I slid down the wall until I hit the floor. The nursery was empty. The yellow walls mocked me. The silver stars on the ceiling blurred through my tears. All is lost. The words echoed in my head. They had won. They had the baby. They had the legal ground. They had the narrative. I was the crazy Irish girl who couldn't handle motherhood. I was the villain. I sat there for a long time. The sun went down. The room turned gray, then black. My breasts ached heavy with milk that had nowhere to go. My body throbbed. I closed my eyes and pictured Orla. I pictured my mother standing on the cliffs of Moher, the wind whipping her hair, holding my hand so tight it hurt. Don't stay here, Shay. Go far. Live big. I opened my eyes. They had taken my laptop. They had locked the door. They had taken my baby. But they had made one mistake. Judith had said, "It's my house." She thought she knew everything about this house. She thought she knew every corner, every secret. But she didn't paint the walls. She didn't install the baseboards. She didn't know about the loose panel in the back of the closet. I stood up. I wiped my face. I walked to the closet. I pushed aside the hanging clothes, the onesies I would never use, the tiny jackets. I got down on my hands and knees. I dug my fingernails into the edge of the baseboard behind the diaper pail. It gave. I pulled the panel away. Inside, nestled in the insulation, was a small waterproof bag. I pulled it out. Inside was the burner phone I had bought with cash 2 weeks ago, the stack of jewelry I had taken from the safety deposit box, and the passport. Not mine, Saoirse's. I had lied to Judith. I hadn't just applied. I had gone to the embassy in San Francisco 3 weeks ago claiming an emergency. I had forged Mitchell's signature. I had the document. I turned on the burner phone. The battery was at 40%. I dialed a number. "Dana," I whispered when she answered. "They took her. Execute the sale. Now. Shay." Dana's voice was sharp. "Where are you?" "I'm locked in the nursery," I said. "But I'm getting out." I hung up. I looked at the window. We were on the second floor. There was a trellis against the side of the house, covered in dormant wisteria vines. I had planted them myself. I knew how strong they were. I put the phone and the passport in my pocket. I zipped up my hoodie. I wasn't crazy. I was a mother, and I was coming for my daughter. I opened the window. The cold rain hit my face. It felt like baptism. It felt like war. I swung my leg over the sill. I didn't look back at the yellow room. I looked down into the dark, and I jumped. The wisteria vine was older than the house, a twisted woody rope that clung to the siding with the stubbornness of a bad memory. I swung my legs over the windowsill, the rain instantly soaking through my hoodie and plastering my hair to my skull. My feet found the first foothold, a thick knot of branches just below the gutter. I didn't look down. I looked at the wall inches from my nose, counting the flakes of peeling paint. I lowered my weight. My arms screamed. My abdominal muscles, still stitched together and raw from the birth, seized in a spasm of hot, sharp agony. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I bit my lip until I tasted copper, forcing a grunt back down my throat. One step, another. The vine groaned under my weight. A branch snapped loud as a pistol shot in the quiet night. I slipped. My hands scrabbled against the wet wood splinters, digging into my palms. I slid 3 feet, the rough bark tearing through my sweatpants, scraping the skin off my shin. I caught myself just before the trellis gave way entirely, my boots finding purchase on the top rail of the deck. I dropped the last 4 feet to the muddy ground. The impact jarred my teeth and sent a fresh wave of fire through my pelvis. I collapsed onto my hands and knees in the dirt, gasping for air, the rain mixing with the sweat on my face. I stayed there for 10 seconds, waiting for the black spots in my vision to clear. "Get up! Orla didn't raise you to die in the mud." I pushed myself up. I was covered in slime, shivering violently, but I was out. I ran to the potting shed at the back of the garden. My hands were shaking so badly I fumbled with the latch. Inside it smelled of dry earth and fertilizer. I reached into the bag of potting soil on the bottom shelf, digging until my fingers brushed cold metal. The spare key fob for my car. I had hidden it there 6 months ago, not because I planned to leave, but because I was always losing things. Now, it was my lifeline. I ran to the driveway. My Subaru was parked behind Mitchell's spot, cold and dark. I pressed the unlock button. The lights flashed. I didn't turn on the headlights. I rolled the car down the driveway in neutral, the tires crunching softly on the gravel. Only when I was around the corner, hidden by the neighbor's massive hedge, did I start the engine. I drove. I didn't look at the speedometer. I drove with the reckless precision of someone who has nothing left to lose. The windshield wipers couldn't keep up with the deluge, the world blurring into streaks of neon and gray. Judith lived in Dunthorpe, the old money neighborhood where the driveways were long and the gates were high. It was a 20-minute drive. I made it in 12. The house was a fortress of white brick and black shutters, sitting high on a hill like a judge looking down on the city. Lights blazed in the living room windows. They were awake. They were celebrating. I parked the car a block away, tucked behind a line of oak trees. I pulled my hood up and walked. My wet clothes were heavy, dragging me down, but the adrenaline was a hum in my blood, louder than the rain. I reached the side gate. It was locked. I didn't bother with the keypad. I climbed over the stone wall, ignoring the scrape of rough rock against my palms. I landed in the rose garden, the thorns catching my sleeves. I crept to the back patio. The French doors were glass, offering a perfect view of the stage. Judith was there. She was holding a crystal wine glass, standing by the fireplace. She looked triumphant. The firelight danced on her pearls. Mitchell was sitting on the leather sofa, his head in his hands. He didn't look like a winner. He looked like a man waking up from a hangover, and there in the center of the room, in the antique bassinet that Judith had kept for 30 years, was Saoirse. I watched them for a moment. Judith said something, gesturing with her wine glass. Mitchell nodded, taking a sip from a tumbler of amber liquid. They were toasting. They were toasting the destruction of my life. I walked to the keypad by the back door. I knew the code. It was the date Mitchell's father had died. Judith never let anyone forget a tragedy. 0819. The lock clicked. I opened the door. The rush of warm air hit me, smelling of wood smoke and expensive red wine. I stepped inside. I didn't sneak. I walked into the center of the room, dripping water onto the Persian rug. "You should really change your security codes," I said. The silence was absolute. Judith dropped her wine glass. It hit the hearth and shattered, splashing Merlot across the white marble like a spray of blood. Mitchell jumped to his feet, his drink sloshing over his hand. "Shay," he choked out. He looked at me, mud on my face, blood on my hands, water pooling around my boots, as if he were seeing a revenant. How did you get out?" "I climbed," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "I climbed out the window. You locked me behind." "You're insane," Judith whispered. She took a step back, her hand going to her throat. "You broke out. I'm calling the police. You're proving everything we said. You're dangerous." She reached for her phone on the mantel. "Call them," I said. "Go ahead. Tell them you kidnapped my nursing infant. Tell them you locked a postpartum woman in a room without food or water. Tell them about the pills you tried to feed me. We were protecting the baby." Judith shrilled, her composure cracking. "You were unstable." "I have the audio, Judith." I lied. Or maybe it wasn't a lie. I had the burner phone in my pocket, recording right now. I have the text messages. I have the receipts from Aubrey. And I have something else. I took a step toward the bassinet. Mitchell moved to block me. "Don't touch her," he warned, trying to muster some authority. "You're not taking her." I looked him in the eye. "Get out of my way, Mitchell, or I will ruin you, not just your marriage, your life. You have nothing." Mitchell sneered, though his eyes darted nervously to the mud on the rug. "You have no money, no lawyer. You're a squatter in my house." "It's not your house," I said. "It will be." Judith cut in, recovering her voice. "We'll have you declared incompetent. The power of attorney will revert to Mitchell. The house stays in the family." I laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound. "You can't inherit what doesn't exist," I said. Judith narrowed her eyes. "What are you talking about?" "I sold it," I said. The room went still. The fire popped. "You—" "What?" Mitchell asked. "The house on Skyline. I sold it. A cash offer from an investor in Seattle. We closed escrow 3 hours ago." I reached into my soggy pocket and pulled out the folded confirmation page Dana had emailed me, now damp and wrinkled, but legible. I threw it on the coffee table. $415,000, I said. wired directly to an irrevocable trust in Ireland. It's gone, Judith. The equity, the legacy, the nursery you tried to decorate. It belongs to a stranger now. Judith picked up the paper. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. She read the lines, she read the date. Her face went gray. You couldn't, she whispered. Mitchell is on the deed. No, he isn't, I said. You made sure of that, didn't you? You made sure I bought it with my own money, so you wouldn't have any liability if the market crashed. You kept his name off it to protect his credit score. You played yourself. Judith looked at Mitchell. You told me you were on the title. I thought I was, Mitchell stammered. We signed so many papers. You signed a mortgage for the remodel, I corrected him. I signed the deed. I walked past Mitchell. He didn't move. He was staring at the paper as if it were a death warrant. He was realizing that the golden parachute he had counted on was gone. He was realizing he was broke, divorced, and tied to a mother who had just lost her biggest asset. I reached the bassinet. Saoirse was awake. She was looking up at the chandelier, her eyes wide and dark. She looked so small in the ornate, frilly bedding Judith had chosen. I picked her up. She felt solid and real against my chest. She smelled of Judith's perfume, but beneath that she smelled of milk and promise. We're leaving, I said. You can't leave the country, Judith hissed. She had dropped the paper and was now advancing on me, her eyes manic. I have your passport. I looked in your bag. You don't have it. I don't need mine, I said. I have hers. I patted the pocket where the tiny blue booklet sat against my hip. That's impossible, Mitchell said. I never signed the application. You sign a lot of things without reading them, Mitchell, I said. Like the insurance forms I put in front of you 3 weeks ago, the ones you signed while watching the football game. Mitchell's jaw dropped. Forgery, Judith breathed. That's a felony. Prove it, I challenged. Prove it without admitting in court that you hired a mistress, embezzled marital funds to an offshore account, and imprisoned your wife. Dana found the Cayman transfer Mitchell, $300,000. That's tax fraud. Do you really want to bring the authorities into this? Judith stopped. She was a woman who understood leverage. She looked at the shattered wine glass. She looked at her son who was slumped on the sofa defeated. She looked at me covered in mud holding the baby like a shield. She calculated the odds. She calculated the publicity. She calculated the shame. Go, she whispered. The word was like acid in her mouth. Mom, Mitchell protested. Let her go, Judith snapped, not looking at him. She's gone. She's dead to us. She looked at me then, and her eyes were empty holes. You will fail, she said. You will be alone, poor and miserable in some rain-soaked village. And that child will hate you for taking her away from all this. She gestured to the room, to the crystal, to the fire, to the wealth. I looked around the room. I saw a cage, a gilded, beautiful cage. She won't hate me, I said. She'll thank me. I turned and walked out the door. The rain was still falling, but it didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like cleansing. I strapped Saoirse into the car seat base I had kept in my trunk, the one Judith said was too cheap to use. I got into the driver's seat. I locked the doors. I drove away from the big house on the hill. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. The road to the airport was a blur of lights. My phone buzzed. It was Dana. Funds confirmed. Wire initiated. You are clear. Go. I pulled into the long-term parking at Portland International. I abandoned the car. I left the keys in the ignition. I left the rest of the clothes in the trunk. I took only the waterproof bag, the diaper bag, and my daughter. The terminal was quiet. It was the red-eye flight, the one that connected through London. I walked to the counter. The agent looked at my muddy clothes, my wild hair. Rough night, she asked kindly. You have no idea, I said. I handed her the passports. My Irish one, Saoirse's brand new American one. She scanned them. The computer beeped. I held my breath. Had Judith called? Was there an alert? Was there a police officer walking up behind me right now? The agent typed something. She frowned. One moment, she said. My heart stopped. I gripped the handle of the stroller until my knuckles turned white. I looked for the exit. Could I run? Not with the baby. The infant's ticket, the agent said, looking up with a smile. It wasn't linked to your meal preference. Did you want a bassinet seat? I exhaled. The sound was a sob that I turned into a cough. Yes, I said. Please, The bassinet. All set, boarding in 40 minutes, gate D4. She handed me the boarding passes. I walked through security. I walked to the gate. I sat by the window and watched the rain streak against the glass. The plane was waiting, a silver bird that would take me home. But as I sat there watching the ground crew load the luggage, a notification popped up on my burner phone. It wasn't Dana. It wasn't Mitchell. It was an email alert from the home security system at the Skyline house, the one I still had access to until midnight. Motion detected. Nursery. I opened the app. The feed was grainy night vision green. Judith was in the nursery. She was standing in the middle of the empty room. She had a can of paint in her hand. She was painting over the stars. I watched her cover Orion with a thick gray stroke. She was erasing me. She was erasing the memory of the girl who dared to defy her. I didn't feel angry. I felt pity. She was stuck in that house painting over ghosts. I looked down at Saoirse. She was sleeping, her tiny hand curled into a fist. Let her paint, I whispered to my daughter. We have the real sky where we're going. They called my boarding group. I stood up. I turned off the phone. I dropped it into the trash can next to the gate. I walked down the jet bridge, and I didn't look back. The pen scratched against the paper, a final definitive sound in the quiet office. Shay Donovan, I signed my name for the last time as a homeowner in Portland. Funds will be wired within 2 hours, the escrow officer said, handing me a copy of the receipt. $415,000, sole and separate property. Thank you, I said. I walked out into the gray February drizzle. My phone buzzed a text from Dana. Served. He has the package. You are clear. I sat in my car for a moment, listening to the rain. Mitchell was opening an envelope right now. He thought it was a contract. Instead, he was holding 47 pages of evidence that dismantled his entire life. I had one last stop. The house on Skyline Boulevard echoed as I walked through it. The furniture was still there, sold with the property, but the soul of the place was gone. I climbed the stairs to the nursery. The yellow walls glowed in the afternoon light. I looked up. The silver stars I had painted on the ceiling, Orion and Cassiopeia, were still there. I had left them. A ghost story for the new owners. Goodbye, I whispered. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. I drove to Dunthorpe. The gates to Judith's house were closed. I slid the thick manila envelope into her mailbox. It contained the highlights of the evidence file, the divorce petition, and a Christmas card with a photo of Orla. And a note. Judith, you said I didn't have a mother to teach me these things. You were right. But she taught me one thing: don't stay where they break you. I know about Aubrey. I know about the payments. I know about Amanda. I know you did this twice. The house is sold. Orla and I are going home. You spent 5 months orchestrating the end of my marriage. I spent 8 weeks orchestrating my freedom. The difference is I didn't need to lie. Shay. I drove away. 2 miles down the road, my phone rang. Mitchell, I answered on speaker. Shay, he sounded breathless. I got the papers. What is this? Where are you? Read the file, Mitchell. I said, merging onto the highway. What file? I don't understand. Page 12, I said. Your mother's text to Aubrey. Page 23, the Venmo receipts. Page 31, Amanda's statement. Silence filled the car. Amanda, he finally asked. What does she have to do with this? Your mother hired someone to destroy your first marriage too, I said. It's the same playbook. She did it to Amanda. She did it to me. Ask her. That's insane. Mom would never. Page 12, her own words, this worked perfectly with the last one. She texted that 5 months before you met Aubrey. I heard a phone ringing in the background on his end. Judith. She had found the envelope. Where is Orla? Mitchell's voice cracked. With me, where she belongs. You can't just take her. Read the custody agreement. Dana's number is on page 1. Sign the papers, Mitchell. For once in your life, do something without asking your mother first. I hung up and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. Portland International Airport was quiet at 5 in the morning. I pushed the stroller toward the check-in counter, my single suitcase trailing behind me. Just me and the baby, I told the agent. I handed her the passports, my well-worn Irish one, Orla's crisp new American one. The agent scanned them. I held my breath, waiting for an alarm, a flag, a police officer. Did you want a bassinet seat for the infant? She asked. The air rushed back into my lungs. Yes, please. I took the boarding passes and walked through security. I sat at the gate watching the rain streak the windows. The plane was a silver promise waiting on the tarmac. I pulled my phone out of my bag. I hadn't looked at it since the drive. The screen lit up. The notifications scrolled endlessly. Mitchell, 34 missed calls. 12 texts. Judith, 75 missed calls. 109 missed calls. 75 from Judith. 0 texts she knew better than to leave written evidence now. She had called 75 times, desperate to control the one thing she couldn't reach. 34 from Mitchell, begging, confused, terrified. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I didn't open the texts. I looked down at Orla, awake and staring at the ceiling lights. Grandma called 75 times, I whispered. Daddy called 34 times. You know who didn't call? I touched the silver claddagh ring on my finger. Grandma Orla. Because she's right here. We boarded. I settled into the window seat, strapping Orla into the bassinet. The engines roared, a deep vibration that went through my bones. As the plane lifted off, I watched Portland shrink below us. The gray city, the wet roads, the house on the hill, they all disappeared into the clouds. We broke through the overcast into blinding sunlight. Hours later, we landed in Dublin. It was raining here too, but it smelled of peat and salt. I walked into the arrivals hall. Siobhan was standing there holding a handwritten sign, Donovan's Welcome Home. She dropped the sign and hugged me, smelling of wet wool and family. Let me see her, she said, pulling back to look at the baby. Jesus, she has the head of Orla off her. She does, I said. I looked down at my hand. I twisted the claddagh ring. I turned the heart outward. Heart available. Not for a man, but for the world. For myself. I didn't turn my phone back on. 109 missed calls could stay in the cloud. I adjusted the strap of the diaper bag, held my daughter close, and walked out into the rain. Shay Donovan's exit wasn't just about leaving a marriage. It was about rejecting a narrative written for her, not by her. Her story teaches us that the most vital survival skill isn't just instinct, it's preparation. That ding on the iPad wasn't paranoia. It was a warning. But notice that Shay didn't scream or fight immediately. She gathered receipts. In a world that loves to label women as unstable or emotional, that documented truth is the only shield that manipulation cannot penetrate. There is also a hard practical lesson here. Financial independence is self-preservation. Shay walked away with her daughter because she kept her name on the deed and her funds separate. Love shouldn't require you to erase your safety net. Always keep your name on the paper. Always have a plan. Ultimately, you don't have to stay in the rooms where you are broken. You can go where you are built. It is terrifying to climb out a window into the rain, but the emptiness of a fresh start is far better than the suffocation of a lie. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a ding moment, a split second where the veil dropped and you saw the truth? Share your story in the comments. Let's remind each other that we are not crazy.